Hel- Hello, good morning, everybody. It's a great weekend, and today I have Nidya from Bank of West, is a mortgage consultant and a mortgage banker who give us an information about pre-call versus pre-approval. In this scenario, or like in this home buying scenarios, right? Pre-call versus pre-approval should be known. So hi Nidya, thanks for joining today.
Hi, Nagaraj. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I think I had one experience to share. Like last 2 weeks back, we were putting an offer. Okay. And my client didn't add in a pre-approval and he got in a pre-call and we put an offer. Okay. And our offer was outright rejected because it was a pre-call. So I would like to know what's the difference between a pre-call and a pre-approval so that it would help for the home buyers.
Yes, I can go over the difference between them. Before we start, I just want to read a quick legal disclaimer from Bank of the West. And the information presented is not intended to be legal advice or credit counseling. The content presented is purely informational. Any opinions expressed in this presentation are not necessarily the views of Bank of the West, PNB Paribas, or other affiliates, but are the independent views and opinions of the presenters. The materials presented are intended to be general and not specific to any mortgage or home equity products that may be available through or offered by Bank of the West. All loans are subject to credit approval. And in general, what you can probably pick up from the statement is that everybody's situation is going to be unique,
True.
right?
Yeah, that's what I keep telling everybody. Whatever we might be saying is a generic until we have all your documents. Nothing is confirmed. It's a generic information we try to see. It all depends on client by client basis.
That's right. And that's where the importance between that relationship between the real estate agent and the client, it develops over some
True.
time, and also with the loan officer, because they get to know you, your financial situation, your long-term goals, which is something that I always discuss with people when they're looking for a home. I want to know what are their long-term goals with this, so that I understand what type of product they might be more interested in. If it's
True.
something that's a short holding, long-term holding, they're a stepping stone home, or their forever home, right?
Yeah.
So talking about the difference between the prequels, I know that in general, I guess you're looking at it from three different layers: prequal, pre-approval, and then underwritten pre-approval.
Great.
Because
Yeah. Mhm.
I've learned that in the past, sometimes a prequal, or at least the way some bankers used to take a prequal, was they would simply pick up the phone, and based on a verbal conversation, they could just generate an idea of what the client may qualify for based on that conversation, right? That this was a while back. I don't know if they still do that.
I think still they do it. What they do it is like they just collect your what is your income. They don't verify your income. They
Mhm.
just based on the verbal inputs or verbal things, whatever the clients provide. Based on that, they generate a pre-call.
Yes, and then the way that I would take it would be more of a pre-approval, where I'd actually take an application with the documentation, right? So it's I like to call it like the 222 rule, because you're looking at, like, usually it's like two pay stubs that usually covers 30 days, and then you have two bank statements or asset statements, that's like 2 months, and then you have 2 years tax returns, and then you'll have like maybe 2 years of your W-2s, right?
Mhm.
So once I receive that, I can go into the document and give it an upfront review. And if there are any questions that come up,
So
look at the history. That's a
one second on
pre-approval.
this. Like, what are the documents needed for the pre-approval? Bank statements. You need a 2 years of W-2 and 2 months of your payslip. Is that correct?
Yes, so it's two months of your asset statements. So
Okay.
it can be your checking, savings, retirement accounts, stocks.
Mhm.
So anytime that a mortgage banker or mortgage officer asks you for your bank statements, you always want to give them 2 months.
Okay.
And it has to be the most recent 2 months of whichever just closed. Like, for example, right now, it would probably be up until January 31st, right? That's
Okay.
probably what you would want to do. So December and January.
Mhm.
And when they say two pay stubs, they're looking at the last two pay stubs for the last 30 days, the current ones.
Okay.
And then 2 years tax return, right? So
Mhm.
if you haven't filed 2022, then you'd give us 2020, 2021,
Mhm.
right?
Okay.
W-2s, same thing. We want 2020, 2021 to match up with the tax returns.
Mhm.
And let's see, what else?
And I think sometimes they even collect the December pay slip, right? December end pay slips to
Yes,
verify.
if you are the type of employee that receives additional income besides the salary or the hourly, maybe you have commission or bonuses,
Mhm.
then you really want to submit those year-end statements, pay stubs, which would be like the year-end one for maybe 2020 and the year-end one for 2021,
Okay.
because from there the loan officer can see that you have that consistency.
Okay.
And it helps calculate as well what the average is on those bonuses. Keep in mind, with bonuses, something that gets a little bit mixed up is,
Mhm.
for example, in the Bay Area, we have a lot of sign-on bonuses,
True.
and that will be treated differently than a regular consecutive bonus, because
Okay.
bonuses tend to be a one-time thing. But if you can show that it's a you're going to you've received regular bonuses or performance bonuses, even if you've switched jobs,
Mhm.
then that is something that we helps us calculate an average. But sign-on bonuses are a little bit different.
Okay. So by using all this, you try to do the income calculations. Is that correct?
Yes. And you the more income that you show, even if you don't sometimes you don't need as much to qualify, maybe your salary is enough. By us showing that you are making even above the required amount, it
Mhm.
just makes the entire profile a lot more um positive and sellable to our operations, to the underwriter. Tells your story. It's the same thing with assets, right? Same thing with
I
bank
think
statements.
going back to your thing, right? Like there are two kinds of pre-approval you told me. One is the regular pre-approval and underwritten pre-approval, right?
So
In
yes,
the regular pre-approval, all the pre-approvals are run by the banker. Is that correct? Or like, does it goes to the processor and underwriter also?
that would be the underwritten pre-approval. So
Mhm.
the middle one, the one that we were just talking about, the one that I would do, which is the regular pre-approval, is something that where I look at all the documents and I run it through the software. And that's like
Mhm.
a desktop underwriter, right? Because it's just
Okay.
a software. And that will say, yes, this is within our guidelines. And then that's
Mhm.
great. We can generate that pre-approval letter. But
Mhm.
if sometimes, let's say that there are questions about the income or a little bit of unsure, um,
Mhm.
so the best practice would be to send it in to one of our underwriters so
Mhm.
that they can compare that to whatever the requirements or the guidelines are, make sure that it fits. And that gives you a lot more security, I think, when you're putting in your offers. Yeah.
So it is like, for example, you can get an exceptions for the reserves, or it can get an exceptions for your down payments, or it can be exceptions for your income. All this can be taken from the underwritten, right?
Well, what if you have something in advance that
Mm-hmm.
that is maybe right at the hairline of what's
Mm-hmm.
acceptable, then that's when you do want to send it into the underwriter for them to review in advance. Because if you are going to need an exception, then that sometimes they can determine that up front and say, okay, this client seems like we could probably make an exception for whatever the item is, whether it's DTI or reserves. Keep in mind that at the end of the day, they still have to review the property that you choose. But
Okay.
if there are questions on the income, yeah, it's better to have somebody look at it.
So for example, you got an underwritten pre-approval from underwriter, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, and you got an offer accepted, and there was an exception in the DTI during the underwritten pre-approval. So during when the offer accepted, will that question, valid question will be there, or like since the already underwriter already looked into it, so that condition will not be again checked?
It's still going to be checked because sometimes there are changes in people's income during the process, and if there, and also sometimes it's been weeks or months from the last somebody's looked at it, so they're still going to make sure that it's still within the same guidelines or parameters of whatever you submitted at first. So if between the last time that someone's looked at it and now that you're in contract, there's been significant changes that could affect it. But that's why the communication is so important between the loan officer and the client, right? If you're going to make big changes in your finances, one that does happen and is I've had people who've switched jobs after having a written pre-approval, and then that affects the whole profile, right? So you have to continue, even if it takes a couple months in between or whatever. You need to make sure that you have that communication and say, how is this going to work if I move companies, or if I change my asset statements, or my salary has changed? That's really important, because it's all still conditional per se, right?
Yeah.
Until you're actually in the processing part of everything.
Yeah. Because for example,
but at least they'll still give you conditions as well. Even if they say, okay, we think we can grant this exception, they're still going to give you some conditions, right? Like, but make sure that you do X, Y, and Z when you get into contract, so that we can, honor what we're saying. But so everybody has to do their part even then. Yeah.
Yeah. So underwritten pre-approval means it gives a confidence for you. Like most of the times, if your scenarios doesn't change, so almost pretty sure of your loan should not be a problem. If your conditions changes, then it might change. Is that correct?
Well,
or nothing guaranteed until your loan is funded.
Yeah, exactly. I think that any and every bank would say the same thing. Nothing is 100% guaranteed until it's funded. And obviously also because the property plays such a big part of it, right? Yeah. So another thing that has happened is, what if we pre-approve you for a single family home and you buy a condo? So now the guidelines, the terms, everything changes, right? So, that's why it's a little bit tricky. But in general, it also just saves you a lot of time, because what happens when you have an underwritten pre-approval is we do a lot of things in advance. We'll order that work verification of employment from these third parties in advance. We'll order the tax transcripts. We'll review all of that in advance. Social security information, or just questions that might come up about deposits or income. All of that gets done in advance. So when you are in contract, as long as there hasn't been huge changes, the whole process is just going to run a lot smoother, a lot faster. And also the person who's already, maybe the underwriter who's already looked at the file, will be more familiar with what's going on, instead of saying, oh, wait, I have, all of these questions we have to clear up. We've already cleared them up. And now, we can, it's smoother. The process is a lot smoother. Yeah.
Does it cost to get an underwritten pre-approval, or is it a free?
It's free. It's free. It's completely free. The only difference that you'll see is when you just have a mortgage banker look at it, depending on the timeline, it can be 24 to 48 hours, right? To just get
Okay.
that, even be a couple hours. Like
Yeah.
it depends. That could be very fast. When it's underwritten, you're just going to add a couple of days, and it could be maybe like 2 or 3 business days, because the loan
Depending on
officer
the.
really package everything as if they're submitting a full loan without
Mhm.
the property, and send that in. And then someone will, within about 24 hours, they'll pick it up and they'll
Mm.
review it, get back, ask any questions, and let you know what they found.
Yeah, that's great. I think I would suggest if somebody wants to buy the property, never go with the pre-call, especially in the Bay Area market conditions, right? I think
Yeah.
pre-call, if you have the pre-call, seller agent would might outright reject you because you're not done your financially all the checks. How can they even take your offer, right? I
Mhm.
think anybody wants to buy the house, never go with the pre-call. Only two things they can go. One is the underwritten pre-approval or the regular pre-approval. And during this pre-approvals, right, I think you surely will be checking their credits, right? Like, or they're
Mhm.
going to verify through SSN how, what is the credit score and everything, correct?
Yes, we do the background information with well, really with both. With the pre-approval, we're going to look at the credit information, but
Hmm.
the underwritten one is going to go more in depth, right? They're going to look at the history of maybe if there's any like additional homes or changes in residency. But the thing is, everything that they're doing is something that they're going to do anyway once you're in contract.
Yeah.
So if you have the time, right, why not do it all in advance and
Yeah.
save yourself the time or the headache, uh, or even maybe the disappointment later on, when you'll have more answers to your questions, and also the loan officer will have more answers to their questions in advance, and everybody can get through it a little bit um, easier, especially in this market. Yeah, when
Yeah.
it's
What's the
still
validity of
quick.
this pre-approval? Like, does it come with a timeline? Like, you need to buy the pre-approval is only for 3 months. What happens for it expires after 3 months? How easy to get an extension of the pre-approvals?
So the pre-approvals or any of these are going to have that I think it's like 3 to 4 months, right?
Yeah.
So that's how long they're good for. Um and then after a certain period of those months, then you'll have to do another pull on the credit, right? Or renew it.
Uh-huh.
um and start sending in the fresh documents again, right? So
Okay.
yeah, so that will happen, but at least at that point, everybody's, it's going to be a lot simpler because now we're all familiar with what's going on and your history, so we can update the file really quickly.
Yeah, I think for the especially for the real estate, right, agents, for their clients, what are the loan options available? I think it makes really difference when you're buying a house because you were telling like Bank of West as one very good loan option, like where is a reserves might be not needed if you're buying in a conventional loans, like loan limits of less than 1.04 or a zero 0.7, depending on the county limits, right? So I think we were talking about the reserves part. Can we discuss more on that, like reserves?
Well, yes, sometimes there are you can still do some loans without having these reserve requirements, or at least without having such harsh reserve requirements, right?
Yeah.
um but that's also part of just looking at everybody's individual profile. But I can say that one of the great things is that we look at other areas if we do need reserves, like, we can look at your 401k, or I think even cash value on life insurance. So um I've noticed that we tend to have clients come to us
Hmm.
because they've had issues with reserves at other places.
Hmm.
So I'd be more than happy. Yeah. If you're having an issue with reserves, to take a look at it and see if it's something that we can do with no or low reserve requirement. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one more good thing about was the DTI. I think a lot of lenders, the DTI, max DTI is 45% or something, right? But I
Mhm.
think Bank of West has the DTI up to 58%, and that again depends on case by case basis. Is it like, is that the max is 58%, or how is that?
We do have a very high DTI program. It's based on our, part of it is the size of the loan, right? So if you're looking
Correct.
like at a jumbo loan,
Mhm.
then we can look at a higher DTI based on the income. But if you're doing more like a conforming or high balance kind of loan, in order to use that high DTI program, then we start to talk about like the relationship that you have or that you can
Okay.
establish with the bank to take advantage of that.
Mhm.
But yes, it's actually been really great because it's helped a lot of people who are, they might need a little bit more
I think
in
recently one of my client bought it from Bank of West. I think it was really helpful for him when he bought for up to a 1.3 million purchase and 10% down. And DTI was factored, but other lenders outright rejected. But Bank of West of the higher DTI, it really helped him.
I know that it's helped a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it's funny because sometimes people make a joke and say, well, you're a great backup bank because of this. But even as a backup bank, I think that people should consider us also as a uh, their first option too, because like I said, we have such great factors when it comes to our DTI, our reserves, our rates. Like everybody's rates, they fluctuate, but
Mhm.
we're pretty good with our jumbo rates, our high balance rates. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, we offer the relationship pricing, which a lot of people
That's great. Like,
take advantage of.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's great. I think one last question today, Nidya, so I need to understand more on the grants available for the home buyers. I heard like there are grants available based on the home you purchase or the areas you purchase. Do you have more insights into it?
So we have in-house grants that we
Mm-hmm.
can look at. I always tell agents and clients, if you find a house, right, call me, give me the address right away, and I will check if it qualifies for the grant, because the one that we have right now specifically, it's based on the address of the home. And you'd be surprised because people sometimes think that because they're buying in, like the San Jose or Santa Clara area, that the address for that house isn't going to qualify. But we've had houses qualify there. So don't be discouraged or feel like maybe because the price of the house is so high that it's not going to work. Just call, give me the address and I'll look it up. I believe that in the Santa Clara County, it can go up to about 10,500.
Oh,
And
okay.
that is something that you can use towards, like the closing cost or the rates and things like that when you're purchasing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
On what basis this is derived, this grants, or like it's just based on the location is derived, or like how is it coming in?
Well, this specific one is based on the address of the house, right?
Okay.
So it's not something that we can use like to pre-qualify people and say, we have this for sure that it's here, because you have to have a physical address to see if it's in the right area, right?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, that could be money that you can now save, right?
Yeah.
But along with that, there are a lot of third party grants that we are associated with, and
Mhm.
that I'm more than happy to help the client see if they qualify based on, some of them are by county or by city, or by state. And there are application process. So they need a little bit of guidance and just which nonprofits or offer these grants or finding them. I
Okay.
can help direct them that way. And so because some of those are based can be based on income levels,
Oh, okay.
or sometimes they're based on like the city or what you're buying. But yeah. Mhm.
I think that's great. I think before putting an offer also, right? Maybe we can give you the address and come to know, does this house qualify for the grants?
Yeah, that's a good idea, because it could be an incentive to say, oh, okay, this is more appealing, right? If
Yeah.
you have the possibility of having a little bit of money towards that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a great thing. I think. Thank you so much, Nidya. I think, see, like when you buy a house, the buyer, agent, or the realtor, and the loan officer plays a very, very important role for the clients, because if he's especially a first time home buyer and he doesn't know what are the steps involved in buying the house, this three team makes a important role. And
Yes, very
thanks.
much,
Yeah.
very much. I,
And
and I,
thank you
and I
so.
I always like to emphasize that your loan officer is like the middleman, right? Always
True.
think of them as the middleman between you and the banks, right? Because they're there to help guide you and help you through the process, and understand like the different conditions or the different requirements that the bank is
True.
going to have, right? So don't feel like, well, if I communicate too much with my loan officer, it's gonna be bad or can affect me. Actually, it's better because the more you are open with us, then we can ensure that we are helping with like avoiding anything that might come up in the future, or understand like how we can properly, um, how do you say, like
Any as
what the requirements are for
Yeah,
whatever questions are upfront, right? So you avoid anything in the future that can come up, and we're definitely there to be on your side.
I think we
Yeah.
should never hide, especially buyers or anyone wants to borrow something from the bank, never hide any financial related information with the bank, especially mortgage consultants or the bankers, so that they can guide you on the proper path.
Yes, exactly. And we can find out, how it affects the entire profile of what you were doing. So it doesn't catch anybody by surprise at the end. So
Yeah, because
yeah.
recently I was like buying one, my client bought a house in San Jose, and like he never gave the statements of the other investments he had, okay, or
Uh-huh.
like other reserves he was at. Like at the end, later part, when his loan is about to close and he is running low with the reserves, then later he starts, okay, I have this much reserves, I have this much reserves. He
Mhm.
starts sending the documents from the different paths. Instead of that, if you could give it in the beginning of the loan process or the loan start, it makes
Mhm.
easier for them.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And also it can help so that we can clear it up. Sometimes clients they they're not sure. You can have married clients who the husband has his own properties or the wife has her own properties.
True.
And so we can clear up front, like, you're not responsible for these items or you're not on the title, okay, right? So
Yeah.
instead of later on, it can be a lot more time consuming to try to prove that you don't have anything to do with the properties. But maybe at one point you were on title and then you removed yourself. It's good to just let someone know so that we can start gathering the paperwork up front to show that maybe you aren't responsible, or if you are, that it's only like uh, a certain percentage or something, a small piece of it, but not the entire thing, right?
Yeah.
Because that can be very time consuming later on to prove that you're not or you no longer were.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
anytime when you send it to underwriter, it may take 2 days or 3 days, depending on the condition and the underwriter availability, right? And it doesn't
Mhm.
happen overnight for any condition to clear, because underwriter need to review all the documents properly again.
Mhm.
So it will delay the whole loan process. So anything is send it out the documents, the initial start of the loan.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And if you have questions, just ask your loan officer, say,
Yeah.
how does this affect me? Or is this going to be an issue? It's better to know up front than for it to come up later on, because sometimes the underwriting and the processing team, they have access to other tools that we don't, right? So they'll do a search for your name for any titles that you've held. And it could, I don't do that up front. I go based on whatever is in the application or I'm told, but if it comes up later, then it can catch me off guard versus, oh yeah, they've already explained to me about this property and it's, here's the proof, or here, we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nidya, for joining. And if you have, if people was watching recorded later, if you have any questions, do leave your questions in the comments or give me a call and I can connect with you, Nidya. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day, Nidya.
Thank you, Nagaraj.